I wonder whether next season represents Coventry City's best chance of promotion to the Premier League in decades. They've really been the so near, so far, nearly men, haven't they, the last few seasons? Coventry, obviously, playoff final, penalty shootout, sudden death, so close. Then back to Wembley again, that VAR call stopping them in the last minutes there, the last seconds, in fact, getting into the FA Cup final. And then, speaking of the last seconds, we were all prepping for penalties in that playoff semi-final just a month or two ago up at Sunderland. And last chance, header, kick, however you want to phrase it, of the game, flies into the back of the net. And it's Sunderland not only going to Wembley in the playoff final, but going to the Premier League. And Coventry are back in the Championship once again. But I'm pretty positive about Coventry and the long-term movement at the club. I mean, league position-wise, it's patently obvious. I've got the FootMob historical table positions. And obviously from 17-18, when they were in League 2, 2 seasons in League 1, that gives you a fairly steep lineup. But it's not really that line you need to pay attention to. It's the 16th, 12th, 5th, 9th, 5th, where you see Coventry have just become an established top 10 Championship side and an established playoff side, finishing in the top 6 in 2 of the last 3 seasons. And with the kind of compounding of what's been happening over the last 3 years. Yes, step forward, step back, 2 steps forward, 1 back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, etc. I do still think, if I've done my maths correctly with my steps there, they are closer than they've ever been to setting out for a promotion campaign. Obviously, there is the parachute teams to beat, 4 of them this season: Ipswich, Leicester, Southampton with the year 1, Sheffield United with the year 2. But Coventry are starting to look like the teacher's pet, gold standard, the kind of Brentford-Brighton type situation. And there's a few similarities you can look at there, because those 2 teams never had the parachute payments, although they did have well-funded owners. But they did have, the invention of PRS whilst they were on their journey. But what we saw, and particularly from Brentford, was the way things traded up and how £500,000 deals became £1 million deals, became 2, 3, £4 million deals. And that's how they kind of bridged the gap between the haves and have-nots at the top of the Championship. Coventry are in the middle of doing that. The weird thing with Coventry is it was just far more gradual with Brentford, whereas Coventry basically went from having no assets that were massively saleable to all of a sudden getting to the playoff final with Harmer and Gyökeres, selling them for an absolute ton of money. And then all of a sudden, they had lots of money to do it. Now, obviously, in football, I always say as one of my general kind of rules that a sharp rise is followed by a sharp fall. And you do want to improve incrementally. That always works a little bit better. If you can do it gradually over 5 years, there's more of a sense that it's going to last than if you kind of do it all at once. Look at my club, Ipswich. Obviously, double promotion, is fantastic, but that then presents its own problems with things happening quicker than maybe you can keep up with. And, that's a knife edge that Ipswich have kind of got to ride. And I suppose with Coventry, all the money landed all at once, which made it slightly less easy to kind of grow gradually. I mean, some would argue, well, look, just get up there, have a season, take the 100 million quid TV money and your club changes overnight. Yes, that's true, but you want to build something lasting. It does feel that's what Coventry have been doing, because obviously when that money all came cascading in, I think there's going to be more for Gyökeres in terms of sell-on clauses if and when he joins Arsenal as well from Sporting. So that's the gift that keeps on giving. That Brighton reserve signed. That's been a good deal, hasn't it? But the following summer, Hadji Wright, Ellis Sims, Ephron Mason Clark, Liam Kitchen, Milan Van Evik, Victor Torp, Bobby Thomas, Tashihiro Sakamoto, Brad Collins, Jay Da Silva, Joel Latabodier, etc., etc., etc. And those deals were, if transfer market's right, 9 million euros, 7 million, nearly 5 for a couple of them. And I've mentioned the word compounding as well. And look at someone like Sakamoto, where you bring him in from Belgium, obviously, Asian player, Japanese by birth, so new culture, etc., etc. And now, a couple of seasons on, are you with that player in season 23-24 saying, oh, he could shoot you towards promotion? Maybe not, but a couple of seasons later, that groundwork has been laid, and you would say the same. Look, I was going to say about Bobby Thomas, Victor Torp, Milan Van Evik, he will probably be sold. I've kind of thought that for a fair wee while, and I think the arrival of Kane, Kessler, Hayden maybe guarantees that. But Mason Clark, look, Sims, that hasn't worked out, and Lampard doesn't seem to fancy him. But Haji Wright as well, there's striker ready to go now with a couple of years under his belt. That was supplemented as well last season. If I press my buttons here on my iPad, Jack Radoni, he was one of the hot hands in the whole division, wasn't he, at the end of last season? Matt Grimes, Lewis Binks, that was converted. Brandon Thompson-Asante, Norman Bissett is obviously very young. Oliver Dovin, I mean, that's a shame the keeper there, he's injured, but big links for Carl Rushworth now, which would again be a tremendous signing. And they haven't really had to cash in since Gyökeres and Harmer. Yes, it might be Van Evik this season, but this idea that you can sell stars and then build even more stars, that's what Brentford did. That's what Brighton less so, but that's definitely what Brentford did, and they are always the standard bearer. I think maybe Brighton are the standard bearer when you get up there in terms of your scouting and what you do. But in terms of the Coventry journey, it does feel like you can make sensible comparisons with Brentford. You can tell me in the comments whether my comparisons are sensible enough. But what I'm saying is, despite playoff heartbreaks and, FA Cup semi-final heartbreaks and all of that, there's a lot of work that will be paid off. Do you know what I mean? It's like sometimes in life, even if you're trying to lose weight or something, or trying to get muscly at the gym, sometimes this point here where everything pays off is more to do with this thing over here, etc., etc., all compounded and all leading up to this coming season. So, when I say best chance in years, obviously I'm sure I'll get some wise ass in the comments say, well, Ben, the best chance was a one-off game at Wembley, one game for promotion. It's very easy to judge a season in the last game when you know everything that's happened in that season. I'm talking going into a season because, that was a bit of a strange year where we ended up with Luton and Coventry, and we knew we were going to get a, kind of romantic rising up the league story with whoever was winning the player final. But going into a season now, it does feel like Coventry very, very established as a team that many will expect to finish in the playoffs. And those names, let me just bring the squad up in terms of being able to compete with the parachute teams. Yeah, okay, the parachute teams will have players who've been signed for 10, 15, 20 million or whatever. But if you can put out Haji Wright, Ephron, Mason Clark, Sakamoto, Radoni as, say, a one up top and three off the front, and I don't know, you've got Ben Sheaf and Matt Grimes as your central midfielders, or Victor Torp in there, and Kessler, Hayden maybe, and Da Silva as your fullbacks, and then a choice of Thomas and Kitching or Latabodier, whoever at centre-back, and is Rushworth coming in and being the keeper? This is all assuming that Van Evik will be sold. It's a decent 11 that's been built over 3 years. Which then brings us to the manager. And I always say, with world-class footballers and very, very famous footballers who become managers in the Championship, it's very, very hard to have a sensible conversation. The sense of derangement is very, very real. People really struggle to cope with the idea of world-class famous person in Championship at club that isn't necessarily massive and elite. So it's hard to have a sensible conversation about, particularly players that have been England players in the golden generation as well. But Frank Lampard now needs to deliver, doesn't he? And he needs to deliver a promotion in the Championship. I thought he did really well at Derby in 2018-19 to get to the playoff final there, and particularly in that season. And when you look at what Aston Villa had at that disposal, you would almost say that's about as good as he could have done there. One game from the Premier League with Derby. He's obviously been back for half a season. Really good run for Coventry. Obviously, that's been another big thing in the Coventry story, that the guy that took them up the leagues, Mark Robins, that kind of story ended, with the departure of Adi Vivash and the results kind of tailing off last season. But the kind of signs from Lampard early, I was going to say they were always going to rise up the table. I always thought there was an underperformance. And I don't know, whether sometimes George Burley at Ipswich, sometimes managers are just at clubs and things just run their course and the messaging stops working. And you just have to make a change, even if they've been legends like, say, a George Burley or a Mark Robins would be at Coventry. But Lampard, aside from all of the derangement, if you were to look just purely statistically at his work in the Championship, he wins a lot of games, doesn't he? And he's basically had a couple of seasons in the division and ended in the playoffs in both of them, hasn't he? So he knows his way around the level, and I think maybe the derangement will never stop. But for those people who are doubting Lampard, the manager, he needs to put a promotion on the board, and this feels like a decent chance, doesn't it? Aside from Coventry, there is always the argument you do need a favour from the parachute teams, don't you? Because if they all kind of perform, if everyone in football performs kind of how they should, you can just basically order the league in terms of who's got the most money. Generally, that works as a concept in kind of football analysis, doesn't it? But fortunately, there's more variables than just who's got the most money. And, with the situation at Leicester with possible points deduction, that certainly closes the gap between Coventry and Leicester. Sheffield United are going into year 2. And Ipswich and Southampton, as I mentioned, Ipswich have got to cope with, promotion. They've been in a different division in each of the last 4 seasons. Southampton have a new manager. I can easily make the argument that Coventry are more stable than, well, you tell me. Name me a club in the Championship more stable than kind of Coventry, or name me a club in the Championship whose trajectory is more steady if you wind it back to that, whatever it was, 17-18 season and the start of the rise up the leagues. So I think things look pretty positive for Coventry, and I do. People always accuse us YouTubers of clickbait titles, but I will, title this about, a best chance in decades for Coventry for promotion. Let me know your thoughts down there in the comments. Let me know, do you agree with my theory about some compounding that's happened over the last 3 seasons and development of players and signing of players that could all pay off next season? What are your thoughts on the competition, and particularly the parachute teams? You're probably going to have to get above a few of those, aren't you, to get the job done? And what about Mr. Frank Lampard? Let's have sensible conversations about things that he's actually done or not done, rather than this strange obsession with who he was as a player and the fact that he's now in the Championship with Coventry City. Get all your views and comments on all of that. Have a little click up there. I'm trying to have a look at as many clubs in kind of individual circumstances and deep dives as I can. So up there is the look I've already had at Sheffield United. We're going through the playoff losers first, and Coventry will certainly hope we're not going to be describing them as that this time next year.